All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome, one and all, to Cypher State. Cypher State is a podcast from the Crowdsourced Politics and Crowdsourced Tribune network where we talk about foreign affairs and foreign policy issues facing the world today with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. Today, I am joined by Tiberius D.
Hello.
North Countryman. And Joe Chadwick.
Hello, everyone.
If you can move slightly closer to your phone, if at all possible, just so we can hear you a little bit better, that would be great. If this is your first time tuning in, we are starting this show up to be a monthly foreign affairs, foreign policy podcast that you can catch every third Sunday of the month, starting at about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we get into the show, I'm going to let everybody talk about themselves a bit, get a little shout out so you can know our audience, our guests, our audience can know the guests a little bit more. We'll start off with Tiberius D and work our way down. So Tiberius, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Fantastic. All right. I am a geopolitical enthusiast and I study in economics and political science. Today, I'm very excited to be here because one of my specialties is Western Europe and North America. And we're going to be talking about Germany, the Deutsche. I love Germany. It's great. And so I'm actually pretty well versed in German politics. And so I can't wait to do this episode. Thank you for having me.
Oh, hold on a second. Just got to tab back over. Always a pleasure to have you, Tiberius. You are always welcome to be on this show every single time. And whatever else we do, we'll let you know so you can be determine if you want to be on or not. North Countryman, how about you? How about you introduce yourself? Let our audience know a little bit about yourself.
I am North Countryman. I am a major political nerd. I've been either studying it or teaching it for about an entire decade of my life. And now I've taken to Twitch to see if I can help out the Twitch politics community here, because it's nice and growing, and this podcast stuff is, one of the shining beacons in there of some good stuff. And I'm interested in the German election stuff. I'm not as well versed on European politics as Tiberius, but I know some stuff about government organizations and federations. So how this affects the EU will be really interesting.
And if you are just turning in for the first time, North Countryman and Tiberius have been on our second episode, and we hope that they'll be here as often as is possible. Joe Chadwick, how are you doing? Let our audience know a bit about you. How did we meet? Whatever you want to say, go for it.
I'm Joe Chadwick, and I'm also a political nerd. I usually like to talk about politics, spend time on Facebook debating or discussing politics in my free time. And I've known Anthony for a while now in a number of different Facebook debate groups, and it's good to be on in real life. And I probably don't know as much about the German politics as Tiberius does, but I will be sure to ask a lot of questions.
And Joe Chadwick, it's always a pleasure to have you around, even though we might butt heads time to time about different issues. It's always been cordial, and I have no animosity towards you, and I'm sure it's the same way. So I'm glad that we have a different perspective on the show than what we normally might have.
Well, also communicating by text is a terrible way. I think the format of arguing on Facebook instead of like this on video chat contributes to probably a lot of stuff because you're dealing with blocks of text.
Yeah, for sure. You're breaking. Is he breaking up for anybody else?
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
okay.
It's probably a connection issue.
Are you connected using? Are you using your Wi-Fi, or are you using like your cell phone network?
With my cell phone network, that might work.
Yeah. So we'll just wait for Joe Chadwick to come back. Sometimes these issues happen as he gets switched over, but then we'll get into it. And I will have the chat up.
As previously mentioned on the news roundup, if I'm involved, there's going to be tech problems galore. It's like, I am the Jonah to Twitch. I will cause bad luck.
And
Stop
Joe, if it turns to be a problem, okay, I guess he's gone again. But we'll just wait. Sorry, everybody. Tech issues are the bane of everyone's existence. That's why I paid for this program, so that we would have it less. But we'll see how it goes. Joe, before you got disconnected, if it becomes an issue for you, you can turn off your video. A little bubble where your name is will show up, and so we can tell when you're talking and things like that. So if it becomes an issue,
am I coming out more clearly? I switched off the Wi-Fi, so.
It sounds a little bit better to me, but I'll have to have we'll have to just go and make do with it. It's fine.
Okay.
No worries about it at all. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is Cypher State. Cypher State is a foreign affairs, foreign policy podcast coming from the Crowdsourced Tribune, a not-for-profit born out of a funky little debate community in the corner of Facebook's debate community, coming at you with foreign affairs, foreign policy analysis with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. As we already introduced everybody, we'll go ahead and get right into the show. Today, we are going to be talking about the recent German elections, what they mean for the EU, what they might mean for America, and what they could mean for geopolitical forces going forward. I think that the first thing that we should talk about is probably giving a brief recap, or maybe even an extensive recap, of what happened since Merkel decided that she would no longer seek the chancellorship back in 2018. Tiberius, I know this is a near and dear issue to your heart. You are very interested in this, and you said that you have a lot of background information. So I'm going to head and turn it over to you, and you can take this part over. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. I want to start with a little bit of context for our viewers, because some of them might not know exactly what how big of a deal this is. Angela Merkel was chancellor in Germany for the better part of 16 years, right? And this is pretty, I'm not going to say it's unprecedented, but it's been a long time coming in some regards. Now, she was incredibly popular. She has approval ratings of, over 80% or around that. And even at her lowest point, even though, political partisanship and all that, I don't think she ever dropped below 60. So during this entire time that she has been in charge, she's actually tried to step down 2 or 3 times. But the people that were always lining up to take her place, they got through the preliminary rounds and they were going to have it handed off to them. And then they're just like, whoa, they got to look under the hood, and they didn't like what they saw. Now, I have a whole video on this one over on my channel if you want to check that out, why looking under the hood of Germany is scary as crap. But shameless plug, getting into where this is now is that Angela does not want to be the one who is caught holding the bag when Germany goes to hell here in a couple years. That's why she's stepping down. Now, when she stepped down, her major party, the CDU, which is like a center-right party in Germany, largely lost a significant portion of its popularity, and the 2 biggest rivaling left parties, that being the SPD and Der Grün, which is the Greens, they both picked up combined almost 11 points. And that is a huge swing for a country that has 6 major parties. I'm going to stop with that because I can literally monologue for a while, but I think that gives a little bit of context.
For sure. I do thought it was interesting that it seemed, and people can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is just my perspective of this, is that the CDU also has you could call it a sister party in Bavaria. It's the CSU. Am I getting my acronyms correctly? Is it the CSU?
It is the CSU. It is the
okay.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly the euphemisms here, but it's the Christian Democratic Union for the CDU in English, and then the Christian. It's like a Christian Bavarian Union, but it's basically just partnered to it.
Yeah, and the CSU seems it's a party that exists specifically because Bavaria has very strong ethnic identity, and from what I've been reading over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it seems that they are also kind of a bit more conservative than the CDU proper. Am I wrong about that, or is that a good reading?
You are absolutely right. And the basically the way that we want to describe Bavaria is that it is often described by the Europeans themselves as the Texas of Europe. Is that while they usually have their own particular thing, is that everyone knows Texas has its own thing here, even though they're part of Greater America. Bavaria has that kind of thing going for it. And to set the scale, and I don't want to throw Bavaria down on its own well, but they have a particular blend of politics that is both interesting but also scary, because this is the birthplace of National Socialism. This is where Hitler and his a lot of his cohorts actually came from, not necessarily like personally, but where the ideology took root most of all. Munich, Nuremberg, that kind of thing. And so this area operates a little differently than the rest of Germany and the rest of Europe as a whole. And thankfully, AfD hasn't taken root there, but it is significantly different compared to what we see normally.
And for people that do not know, AfD is Alternative for Germany.
Yes, Alternative for Deutschland.
Yeah, for Deutschland.
Yeah.
It's think Proud Boys plus Richard Spencer plus like anti everything, like all wrapped up into one amalgamation of grossness, right? When it comes to how much that they are anti-immigrant, very, very, very nationalistic, etc. And that's my own biases coming out, but let's be real. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? So if you didn't know, now you know. Yeah, go for it.
Said their Cypher. It's not only that, but it's that in a nation that has had this historically in the worst possible way. So Germany nowadays is super alert about groups like Alternative for Germany. Like in the United States, because of our First Amendment laws, I think you and I may have been having a chat conversation about this. Neo-Nazis are legally allowed to march in the streets. It's abhorrent, but per First Amendment, they're allowed to. In Germany, no, that's not allowed. And they are very much worried about that.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's a very good point to make. What North Countryman here is referring to is that the other night, him and I were chatting within Hans of Hakir's Twitch, and they were talking about. So one of the guests on that program was talking about possibly nationalizing Facebook or social media in general. And we're both like, no, don't do that. And so that's where the context is. Joe Chadwick. One of the interesting things that you brought up with this election was the left, and that is like one of your focuses on this. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe how they came into the national conversation there, and why they might be sidelined here in what we're talking about later?
Yeah, they're kind of a descendant from the from what I understand, the party that used to govern in East Germany. They kind of descend from them, but I know there was a bit of an issue with the streamer Vosh, where he made a comment about how 100,000 of their voters went over to the AfD party, but I think he was quickly corrected, showing that that a lot of parties had lost voters, but actually most of the left parties, Die Linke, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Most of their voters actually went over to the Social Democrats, and that's the main, I think, center left party that is now going to be heading whatever the new governing coalition is going to be. And I believe previously there has been a grand coalition between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. I don't know if in the future if that'll happen again. During talking, forming a coalition, with the party, tell me what it is, a libertarianish type of party. But one of the things I think is interesting about the German election is their voting system, because they don't have a first past the post system like we do in the United States. So they're able to have all the different political parties, and people are not as pressured to vote for the lesser of two evils. So there's an opportunity for people to branch out and for other parties to form. I think from what I understand, Germany, they have kind of a proportionate system where they have a certain number of seats are based on proportionate representation, but they also have some single member seats. So maybe someone can who knows a little bit more about the system can explain it better. But that's how I understand it. The German political system.
Sure, Tiberius, go ahead and inform our audience about how this all works.
Okay, so there's a lot to be said here, so I'm going to give you the quick and simple that I can. Number one, East Germany is still kind of scarred from what happened for 45 years of Soviet occupation. And the two biggest parties in East Germany is Die Linke, which is a lot of people that are, I'm not going to say communist sympathizers, but they're very far left, even for European standards. And then the other major party is actually Alternative for Deutschland, which is the far-right party. Why does that happen? Basically, and a long story short, is that the conditions in East Germany still, after 30 years of unification, have not remotely equal what we see in West Germany. You can literally look on a satellite map at night, and you can see the difference in lights used just in East and West or Berlin, let alone East and West Germany. And so to a large degree, while the country has been unified since 1990, is that they've had a large trouble economically and politically reintegrating. And so while you'll have the SPD moving into particularly Berlin, is that some of these outlying areas do not have that same kind of influence and are still not necessarily fully integrated into the proper German core, if you want to put it in that regard. So where are we at now? I had a train of thought that I should have wrote down a note, and I apologize for that, but he wasn't terribly far off. That Der Linke has had some issues. Now, I don't believe that they went towards going into AFD. What most of them went to is they went to De Grün, which is like the very green-centered, decently progressive party of Germany is where they've largely gone to. And if you have any questions, feel free to add on to that, because I forgot my train of thought.
Sure. I'll piggyback off of this. So, like Tiberius was saying with the light thing, that is the most stark thing that you can think of. It's the most readily apparent difference visually between former Eastern Germany and Germany, quote unquote, proper. And the reason for this is that the amount of money required to economically entirely integrate the two is pretty substantial. Think of the giant lifts that we took during the Great Depression in order to electrify rural America, and multiply that by 10, and that's how much economic direct investment is needed for Eastern Germany. They've committed to a lot of that, but it's been slow going because of budgetary constraints. Germany is still very much debt conscious, and so they do not like taking on a ton of debt. And so they try to tax or cut spending in order to generate spending for others. They were one of the, I believe one of the few European countries that didn't get a massive amount of debt during the EU crisis after the Great Recession. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that is correct. And so they're very fiscally, what conservatives would call fiscally responsible in the United States. And so that is very important thing to note. And also to what Tiberius was saying about the left going to the Greens, you could say that the Greens in Germany are like what AOC would want the Democratic Party to be in the United States, but I wouldn't compare them to the Green Party of the US, simply because the Green Party in the US is, at least in my opinion, pretty fickle and not very well organized. But the Green Party in Germany has had representation pretty much since its founding within their house, their legislative body, and they've actually gone into multiple government agreements between the different parties, either on the local level or even on the national level.
I remembered one of the things I wanted to add in on, and that was when it comes to how the German government works, is that it's very different and a little interesting, and that it's a parliamentary system like what we have in Britain and most of actually the developed world. But one of the other things that that they have that's significantly different is that it is a proportional representative system with with representative actors, and it's really weird. So, in a nutshell, what this is that they have MPs or members of parliament, which is actually their Reichstag, that is elected from their constituency. But they also have party membership awarded based on how many votes the party gets. As long as you get at least 5% of the vote, you're entitled to get at least some level of representation in the Reichstag. Or it's actually the Bundestag. Pardon me.
But anyway, Bundestag,
yeah. Old words.
And I'll on top of that, that's probably the main reason why there's a difference between the Green Party in Germany.
You're breaking up really bad. You're gonna have to repeat yourself,
okay.
Joe.
All right. I was going to say that's probably one of the main reasons why there is a huge difference between the Green Party in the United States and the Green Party in a country like Germany. Is the incentives are different. In the United States, anyone who is serious about wanting to get elected into government has to run Democrat or Republican. In a country like Germany, parties like the Green Party do have a chance of getting into government, and so they probably are able to attract a more professional crop of people because there actually is a pathway in government. While in the United States, for third parties, there really isn't viable.
I would say that's probably more accurate than inaccurate. I don't 100% agree with it, just because I know some of the candidates that have ran for Green Party as official Green candidates in the United States, but that's definitely a huge issue between if we're trying to compare the two. I think we've talked a bit about how the government is set up itself. I think it's good to talk about now. Go ahead, North. What's up?
We mentioned lights previously in the Green Party. Do we want to use that as a jumping off point to talk about traffic lights?
Yes. That's what I was going to. So if you've noticed, this episode is called Traffic Lights ? And the reason being is that because it's a proportional representative system within German politics, there has never been not never, but there has rarely been a single party that controls 50% of seats to dominate the government. And so they go often into coalition governments. The coalition that is seemingly to be happening now is between the SDP, which is Soc Dems, their color is red, the Liberal Democrat Party. Is it called Liberal Democrat Party?
It's FDP, but
FDP, yeah. They're essentially the most Free Democrats, right? Free Democratic Party. That's what it is. Free Democratic Party. Thank you, North Countryman, for that. So Free Democratic Party, which is a libertarian-esque party. I would say they're closer to libertarians like the Liberal Democrats in UK than they are to Libertarian Party in the United States. And the Green Party, which is a progressive liberal left coalition. They have some people that are more progressive than others within their own party, but they are to the left of the Democratic Party. Again, the closest comparison I could make is probably AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. They would probably be Green Party members if not for the way our system is set up. And so their colors are red for SDP, yellow for the Free Democratic Party, the FDP, and green for the Greens. So they're calling it the Traffic Light Coalition. And this isn't a new phenomenon of how they talk about these coalitions. They've called a previous coalition the Jamaican Party, or the Jamaican Coalition, because of the colors were black, yellow, and green. So they've done this before with these cutesy little names about what we're going to call the coalitions that come up. And the talks, at least for the last week, have seemed very positive. But I'm sure that Tiberius and North Countrymen have thoughts about whether or not these would actually happen. But I think it would be good, before we talk about that, is to talk a little bit more about why the SDP came out ahead in the German election, and a little bit more, and what that kind of means for Germany.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I can offer my just initial thoughts on this. So I don't have the background of Tiberius. Most of what I have from this is from news articles and an in-depth analysis from The Economist, which is pretty good. But part of the reason is that the SDP they did better than they've done, but this wasn't a massive sweep. Much of that had to do with just kind of fatigue from Angela Merkel and the CDU, and also their candidate for chancellor, Armin Laschet, which there's no way I pronounced that correctly.
You're not far off.
From what I'm reading, he's uncharismatic and gaffe prone, so maybe he's their Joe Biden, but less charming. But meanwhile, the SDP, they had a guy who was left, but kind of moderate left for that party, and a bit more media savvy, and that helped them significantly. So it's definitely the people at the top of the ticket that helped them, plus just general fatigue from there.
And the SDP, at the Scholz, right? Am I pronouncing his name right? Olaf Scholz. He was the finance minister of during the Merkel's Merkel, at least the last government, Merkel's government, and he has made a extremely strong commitment to remaining center left. There's been arguments from the Reds and some Green members about getting out of NATO. There's been some arguments about decreasing the retirement age. Some arguments about increasing social welfare benefits even more substantially than what Germany already has. And he hasn't nixed all of those, but he's very much moderated them. One thing that he agrees with the Greens on, and this was surprising to me when I read it, is that the minimum wage in Germany is 12 euros an hour. So that's roughly $14 an hour here. And they're going to be raising it up to 14 euros. That's what they've been talking about. So I found that to be very interesting.
I don't have a really, really good background on Scholz and a few of these actors here. Some of them are coming up. Some of them have been kind of like under the radar to a large degree. So I'm not going to really get into the dramatis personae. What I want to get into is a little bit of the history of these parties, because SDP is supposed to be the definitive left-wing party for Germany. They've literally been around since the formation of West Germany back in 46, or at least 49, whatever word you want to use. So, in a nutshell, is that SDP is supposed to be the party. Now, this might be the American in me talking, but it is very concerning for SDP in some regards how much the Green Party, which is basically their ideological counterpart and rival, has able to pick up. They both picked up almost 50 seats, or just over 50 seats in the Bundestag, and they picked up about 10 or 5 points each, respectively, in votership. Now, that's good if you want to build that coalition together, but if they're actually going to have a conversation on who's the proper left-wing party, this is the thing that I'm concerned about with this coalition going forward, is that they're going to have to actually chat about what they agree on, which they agree on quite a bit, and then push it forward, and then they have to sell that to the voters to vote for them again. And one of the big things that I'm really concerned about with this particular coalition, if it were to form, and I said this on my own episode, is I don't see it lasting a full term. I think sooner or later, the SDP and the Greens are going to have some serious issues to reconcile in the fact that they still need to go to the voters and say, I want you to vote for me, not them. And that's going to be very interesting to see how that shapes out. And I think it'll kill the coalition in time, but I could be wrong.
I think that's a fair concern. Joe, please go ahead.
It is where the Overton
Joe, you're going to have to come closer or something. You're just breaking up way too much.
It is interesting where the Overton window is in the United States in relation to Germany, because some of the ideas that are considered centrism by German standards, or that are pretty mainstream ideas or policies in Germany are considered left wing in the United States. So I do think when we do say that a party is considered moderate by German standards, it is, I think it would be interesting to compare German politics to American politics and what is considered centrism or left wing or right wing between each, because I know there's differences and there's also differences in where the parties stand on the issues between the United States and Germany.
For sure. I think one of the key differences would be that the CDU, while being a conservative party for Germany, would be considered liberal Republicans in the United States. I don't want to get too much into the comparison because we are trying to focus on what this means for geopolitical stuff, but it is important to have that kind of idea, the understanding for this, because the CDU still protected their social welfare programs, while Republicans in the United States are constantly trying to get rid of them. So you're correct about that. Let's see.
I'll waive my point of personal privilege on that, Cypher.
Oh, what what do you mean by that? Oh, okay.
Where parties stand on the? I know one big geopolitical issue is the Nord Stream pipeline that's
right
currently in, and that's been a hot topic. Where did these parties, especially this new coalition that's forming?
I'll take in on that. Now, don't quote me 100% on this one, but from what I understand, SPD is kind of lukewarm on it because they do think that climate regulations are a pretty big deal and they want to continue working on that, but they're a lot more slower on it than, say, the Green Party, which hence why it's the Green Party, right?
Right.
So this is actually one of the big conversations there. As far as I'm aware, the SPD is more or less in favor of it because they know by the books that Germany needs access to power and resources, and they have to import the better part of 70% of their energy. So this is a pretty good win for them overall. The FDP, I think, largely agrees with them, but the Greens are largely against it. Now, could be wrong. This is one of those very minute things that I almost have to be a German citizen to really know, but at least from what I gather, that's where the lineup is. And this is one of those things that I was talking about that could actually split the coalition, is that this is an easy thing to get behind if you say, you know what, let's bring back the Grand Coalition. Let's just involve the CDU instead. Or let's just pull FDP into the Grand Coalition, which is what one of the other possible coalitions that have been talked about. There's other things, though, that makes people look at the CDU and it's like, oh, wait, maybe not do that. And that is largely any kind of conversation on German rearmament, which makes everyone scare a little bit, and particularly in how they're going to handle their nuclear program, and that's just how they handle their nuclear plants because everyone wants to shut them down. And the last one is what they're going to do with basically EU and NATO, because a lot of that is budgetary and a lot of that is basically foreign policy, and that's becoming a huge issue in the European Union right now. I'll wait for that.
No, that's a great point. I think a lot of the cleavages between the SDP and the CDU is actually over foreign policy concerns rather than it being any kind of foreign policy and then some minor fiscal things. But it's not, like I said, it's not comparable. You can't directly compare like SDP to Democrats and CDU to Republicans because there's more agreement on social responsibility and government involvement in the social responsibility aspect of it in Germany than there is in the United States. It's almost as if there isn't any conversation. The conversation is more like, well, maybe we shouldn't grow the budget by like 10% versus maybe we should shrink the budget by 10%, right? It's not, it's that kind of difference.
There's always going to be a problem when you try to do comparisons across countries because the histories are just so different. The cultures are so different. It's like you can get generally left and right, but that's about it.
Correct.
What are the hallmarks?
I think we kind of missed a disclaimer here. Are all four of us Americans talking about Europe?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
Yep.
I reached out into my small circle of people to see if I could get anybody that was a German citizen or at least a member of or at least a citizen of the EU. I didn't have any bites. I'm not big enough yet. So if you want to talk about stuff like this, please hit me up on Discord or Facebook or wherever we're at. Twitter's too. You can follow us at Crowdsourced Poll. Hit me up on there and we can get talking about maybe getting you on the show.
That was like a layup. I just tossed that to you and you're like,
I know, that's great.
Well done.
Was that a sports term? Did I use that right?
You did. See, we're all nerds. But I think we kind of covered a bit about the oh, my dog's walking. A bit of the dang it, dogs. Hold on a second.
I love puppers. The puppers are always the fun ones.
They're great, but my dog's got a cone and I don't want her hitting me right with it right now. All right. Sorry about that interruption. So I think we talked a bit about like the election bits and kind of what the differences are between the parties. I think it's time now that we get into the meat and the potatoes of this conversation and start talking about how this could impact Germany, how this traffic light coalition, so to speak, might play out. Get into more about for Tiberius why he believes that this coalition won't last, and how this can impact geopolitical space in in EU and beyond. So the first thing I think we should talk about, I think I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Tiberius for this is to talk about why do you think this coalition that seems to be going well is not actually going well?
Okay, so kind of address this a little bit. There are some idiosyncrasies between the parties, and I largely talked about it as in, are these two parties that are not necessarily completely similar, but similar enough, are they going to be overly competing for votership? And I think the answer is yes. But here's something I want to completely throw into reverse on here, and that is the SPD has very strong working relationships with the CDU. And on top of that, the CDU was the second biggest party working out of this election, even though they used to be the biggest. And so what you're going to do is you're openly going to tell a lot of right-wing voters, hey, you didn't vote for, or excuse me, hey, you didn't get to be represented in this. So they're going to want more representation the next time they go around. Now, if they partner with the CDU, a lot of those more moderate people that would be very easily swings will largely not worry too much if that is the partnership. You got the working relations, you don't have voter swing, that kind of thing. But if you do have the SPD go for a more left-wing government, the problem is that the right's going to feel alienated, and I don't even want to talk about the enfranchisement of AFD. But on the other side of that is that anyone who is going to look at SPD on a favorable side as being a moderate, they may decide, you know what, next time I'm not voting for SPD, I'm voting for CDU, or they're more likely they're a little bit more left, and they're going to vote for Green. The SPD can literally shoot themselves in the foot, and I think anyone who realizes that knows that they have to play it in a very particular way, and I think that is literally going to be the big issue with this coalition going forward. They have to show themselves that they're different enough from the CDU, that they're the left-wing party, while also showing that they're, more moderate and contained, that they're not the Green Party, and that might give them a complete crisis in how they're going to deal with this further.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think the part of the reason why they completely rejected the idea of having a red-green coalition, basically SDP, the left, and the Greens, is to assuage the more right-leaning constituency of Germany from not feeling completely disenfranchised. While the CDU has a very big block, and this needs to be stated outright. SDP got roughly 25% of the vote. CDU got roughly 24% of the vote. We're talking a 1% difference, or not even a 1% difference, because there's like point something or whatever difference between who makes up the governing coalition and who doesn't. And that's why there was these grand coalitions in the past, because they did represent 50% to 60% of the German population in raw voting terms. And so by pulling in the Free Democrat Party, I think that they are able to serve as a check on their more left-wing on their more left within this SDP and also be kind of the yellow light. We're going to just go with this analogy. It's going to be beaten to death by the end of this, but it serve as a yellow light from going too far to the left or too far for being fiscally, quote unquote, irresponsible and the like there. And I think it's a very interesting thing because even in Europe, European countries and the UK, the Liberal Democrats or the Libertarian-like party, while being more socially liberal, is fairly consistent in their ideas of what is and is not proper governance in terms of fiscal and foreign policy.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I do think Germany has a what's called a constructive vote of no confidence system, where if this coalition ever does fall apart, because most parliamentary systems, they're able to change their government with a vote of no confidence, which from how we do things here with impeachment, that whole process. But I think in Germany, they can't just do a vote of no confidence unless they have a new government ready to take the place or a new coalition ready. You'd have to, I don't know the specific details, but I think they have a system in place in Germany to prevent the kind of chaos you see in other parliamentary systems where they just do a vote of no confidence and they don't have a new coalition government ready. We've seen that with some of the multiple governments in Israel where they've constantly have. I think Germany has a system where they have to have a new coalition ready in order to vote out the current one.
I believe that is correct, but I would have to triple check really quick. So I'll do that now. While I do that, North Countryman, what are your thoughts?
In regards to what?
Just what I've said, what Tiberius said, just in general.
I think kind of one of the key things that Germany needs is like they need stability, not just for them, but also for Europe, because in terms of the European Union, they're a little bit the heart and soul of it. Like the euro is somewhat based on their currency, and Angela Merkel, just her longstanding governance and the solidity that she created, it gave people a lot more gave Europeans confidence that, okay, yeah, the European Union can hold up. And without her, then it's like, okay, well, can we maybe go our own way? Do we need the European Union? And nightmare scenario, you also have Russia trying to be a bit more assertive in what they want to do, and they represent kind of an alternative to the European Union. And I've said this previously, you don't want to have authoritarian capitalism be seen as a viable alternative to liberal democratic capitalism, which is mostly what you get with the European Union. So that'd be a very strong, compelling argument for stability, and therefore possibly a grand coalition if a traffic light coalition can't form.
Oh, for sure.
Go
ahead.
One thing to watch with the European Union, with moving forward, what Germany's relationship with France is going to.
Can you move closer to your phone again? Every other word is breaking up on you.
Okay. One thing I think that would be relevant to the future stability of Europe would be moving forward what Germany's relations with France is going to be, since those are the two biggest economies in Europe. And I know Merkel has butted heads a few times with Macron. France has an election coming up in the near future, and so it'll be interesting to see how this new coalition government that forms in Germany, how they get along with Emmanuel Macron in France, and how the German election moving forward, how that's going to impact German and French relations. Also, where Germany is going to stand on issues like with Poland right now, with if you've heard about the Polish, the highest court in Poland ruling that EU laws don't apply to Poland, and that it's created a huge crisis about whether certain aspects of EU law apply there or not. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
No, that's very true. Oh, thank you, Mr. Sachs Keat, for the compliment. Appreciate it. I think that's that's actually a good jumping off point. We do have several elections coming up in the EU. France, as you mentioned, we do have all these kind of other issues with Germany being kind of, I would say, the linchpin of keeping the EU together, or being the strongest vote member of the EU, having the most sway, and how the EU itself has come under strain due to policies either Germany implemented or, for lack of a better term, failed to address well. For example, the Syrian and African refugee crises that have happened within Europe. Germany wanted to bring in 1 million Syrian refugees, and that actually encouraged more refugees to come over than what other European countries were willing to help or deal with. And then Germany basically having to get the EU countries to pay off Turkey to stem the flow of refugees going into the EU. And so this is going to be very interesting to see, because the Traffic Light Coalition should be a bit more liberal when it comes to foreign policy. And this is going to actually impact everything from what Joe said earlier, the pipeline coming in from Russia to Germany, and supplying a larger percentage of the natural gas to Germany and the EU as a whole, and how much power that can give Russia. And so these are the kind of things I think we should talk about now. The floor is open. Whoever would like to go first, just go ahead and put up a hand and we'll get to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the problem here is that, political sympathies aside, the European Union is kind of going to hell. And it's not largely Western Europe or even to some degree Central Europe that's being the problem. It's largely the Eastern European states, and that's largely the nations that were brought into the EU in 2004 that were post-Soviet occupation states. Right now in the Czech Republic, they just had it's not a constitutional crisis, but it's getting to that degree, where they had an election and it was really close, and they're not, I don't know all the details yet, but they're not sure exactly how to sort all the things out because it wasn't a definitive win. So that's a problem. Poland has been problematic since their latest coalition took victory about 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. This is you may have heard about this. I've got pro-life sympathies, but holy crap, they've got it to the point where they almost have outlawed abortion in Poland, which is wow. Outside of that, they did the court ruling that you just said about EU law. And then you've got Bulgaria is in political turmoil, on top of Hungary is almost instituted itself as a dictatorship after COVID. And so a lot of the Europeans are very scared and are very centered on foreign policy in regards to, it's so weird now because the EU is not the United States of Europe, if you will. But what it is that it's a confederation that a lot of the Western Europeans are now very concerned about their Eastern European brethren, because they're in an era of political instability at a time that they really can't afford it. And so I think a lot of European policy, if you will, and that's not just in France, but not Germany, is going to be related on how we're going to pull the European family together before it falls apart. And I think that's probably going to dominate European politics for the next 10 years, at least. And I'll end with that.
Tiberius, just an information that Hungary is Viktor Orban, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because I know he's kind of people concerned about Europe. He is kind of a boogeyman for them, and yeah, it's a bit justified.
I would say it's very just, given everything that they basically got rid of, not entirely, but freedom of press almost does not exist in there right now. So it's really bad.
The range of emotions is kind of this is not very important to this is interesting this is something to keep an eye on. So
Yeah.
if anything I say is a little understated, that's just a me thing.
No, I gotcha. Joe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, did Tucker Carlson go over to meet with Viktor Orban recently in Hungary?
Yes. Yeah, I think he also went to Belarus too, did he not?
I don't know about Belarus,
I think he
but I think he went to Hungary to meet with them.
You guys don't. I don't want to get into that. We'll save the Tucker Carlson beat down for another day. But yes, you are right. He went over there to praise their government, just to kind of show you where these kind of things may lie in that regard. I think the Russian angle here with the can someone say the pipeline again? Nord
Stream.
Nord Stream. Okay, it was Nord Stream. I was getting wrapped around myself. So Nord Stream pipeline coming into Germany, and what kind of leverage that could give Russia over the EU, given how much natural gas that represents for the country. I want to talk a little bit about that and maybe how this coalition might handle that situation.
They can bypass Ukraine and like ship oil directly to Germany. And so, and right now, I think all of Europe is experiencing an energy crisis even worse than what we're having in the United States with the cost of fuel prices. And Russia is an a fuel exporter. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Okay, so going into this for me, Eurasia's having an energy crisis, moreover, and that's everything from Japan all the way over to London, or if you will, the United Kingdom. The entire Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere. The entire Eastern Hemisphere is having an energy crisis, and if you think that it's bad here, almost everything is 3 times the price over there, if not more. So I'm going to table that part. What is a concern here, and a little bit of backstory, is that post-Soviet era, a lot of the oil and natural gas pipelines, and Nord Stream 1 and 2 are both natural gas pipelines, for the record, is that to a large degree, this was all just funneled out of Russia so that you had a particular line. It went to Ukraine, it went to Belarus, maybe the Baltic states, and then it would go into the periphery beyond Czech Republic, Poland, and then there was usually only one line that led to Germany, and it went to Dresden. Post-Cold War, as Europe built up, particularly Eastern Europe, is that we had a lot of these areas industrialize a little bit more and adapt basically Western economic practices. Some of them did better than others. That's not what's important here. What they did geopolitically is that they tied all of their networks together. So if the Russians were pissed at the Ukrainians today and they were still exporting to Belarus, Ukraine could get anything that they wanted because they were now tied into the network from Belarus or vice versa. And so they interconnected the network, and it largely stymied every political advantage that the Russians had economically and geopolitically, unless they wanted to shut down the entire system or they wanted to throttle it. 2, you had 2014 happen, and that was most of their economic sectors were sanctioned. But the number one thing that they couldn't sanction was energy. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Biden administration going after that particular sector because the United States is now energy independent or very close to it. And we don't exactly like the Russians. So, long story short, you have the Americans wanting to get involved with this. You have the Russians, which have got, if it's a direct line, which it is, to Germany, they have direct leverage over Germany. And the last time that kind of thing happened, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, anyone? Third is that you have German domestic concerns, which is both demographic, economic, political. Yeah, this could literally blow up on everybody's face, and I'm not excited to see where that one goes.
No, that's very true. The fact that this can blow up on everybody's faces is of utmost concern. For me, I think what is specifically with the Nord Stream pipeline is concerned is that because of the amount of, I'm sorry, Joe, are you trying to break in? Okay.
Oh no, sorry.
It's all good. But for me, what I think one of the things with the Nord Stream pipeline is concerns is that it represents such a large percentage that if Russia at any point decides, I'm just going to cut that off we'll suffer a little bit economically. You're going to suffer a lot economically for this. We can just, sell the natural gas to other people, or, keep it in our reserves. We can weather that storm. Can you? You need this to heat your homes. Do that in the middle of a severe winter. It's going to have problems, major problems.
Yes,
and that is one of the things that the quote unquote neoconservatives in the United States are having a large concern with. Germany relying on Russia, Germany and other European states relying on Russia for their energy, rather than trying to import it from either the United States or developing their own energy. Fossil fuel energy sectors themselves, using American technology, is that they're worried about this as well. So, and it's a valid concern. I'm not trying to downplay it here or anything. I think it's a very valid concern.
As a neocon in the States, I can confirm that. Yeah, it's, you don't want. Yeah, it's like you don't want you don't want grandma freezing in the winter. So this is kind of a thing where no, you don't want someone to have total control over that. So if they don't like it, they can just twist your arm a little bit. It's not good.
There's one thing I want to add here. And that is a lot of the Americans have been thinking about the next round of foreign policy, whether it's the Biden administration or whoever comes next, is how are we going to keep the Europeans on our side, especially if we decide that we're going to have a second Cold War against China. Not getting on that particular issue. I'm just talking about the people who are planning ahead. And one of the big things that they want to do for the Europeans is they want to export the shale revolution to Europe. Because we have the expertise, we have the technology, we know how to do all this. Europe has been largely resistant to even thinking about it because they are largely a lot more green than we are. However, the real interest here is that if the Europeans do have an energy crisis, particularly this winter, which it looks like they're going to, then yeah, they might change their tune a little bit, because it always sucks when you have to spend a crap ton of money to pay for your heating and gas. So, long story short, here's the problem with Germany in particular. They have nothing to exploit here. Almost everywhere that you can tap into is either in northern France or the old oil fields of Romania, Eastern Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and to some degree Western, and that's largely the French-Belgian border. Germany doesn't have that. Germany has two things going for it. One, it has incredible access to wind throughout the northern part of the country, and so that part of the green energy revolution works for them. The other thing is that they've been doing this wrong, and I have a hell of a quiet problem with this, but they've been shutting down their nuclear plants. That is the major thing they can do to turn this around, and they're walking away from it. So
yeah, I agree with that 100%. Joe, did you want to break in with this talk about the energy situation here? Because I know you're a bit more progressive than the rest of us.
Well, yeah, I was having issues with my camera. Can you see me? Or
yes, we see you fine and everything's good.
Okay, for some reason it's not. Okay, I'm actually pro-nuclear energy. I know a lot of people on the left are anti-nuclear energy. I don't see a major problem with using nuclear energy as an energy source. So I'm fine with countries using that, as long as they're not on fault lines or in the path of a tsunami, like with Fukushima. But sure. And as long as you don't have a Chernobyl type situation, I mean, they have to be well managed and well maintained. Yes, I do think that would be a good path moving forward, is to develop more green energy infrastructure, something we're very far behind here, but also it would be good there as well. I think in the immediate future, Germany is still going to be pretty reliant on Russian natural gas, as well as a lot of other countries in Europe, and that is a form of leverage that they have, as that Russia has as a gas exporter, even now more than before, when gas prices had plummeted. I also think it'll be interesting to see what OPEC does, since they had cut production previously, and I don't know if they're if they're going to change that policy, if they're going to start allowing more production in the future, but we'll have to see. Hopefully they do.
No, I think one of the things with OPEC, and we could talk about this a little bit because it does impact EU, especially with their reliance on imports for all things oil or all things fossil fuels, is that they're trying to recoup a lot of the money lost to COVID. So I don't see them, upping production much. I see them maybe easing on the cuts that they made over time, but I don't see them ramping it back up until middle of next year, personally. Just because as long as the oil price is high, they can recoup some of the lost revenue that they had with experience due to everybody shutting down. So that's just one part of it. One of the interesting things that I did read about within the German elections is that the SDP and the Greens are both agreeing that the number of solar panels that should be either created in Germany and also put on rooftops should be the maximum amount possible. And like pretty much what they're saying is like any new build should have solar panels on the roof of these houses. And another thing is that the Greens are more anti-nuclear than SDP. So just Tiberius's thing, I think that is another wedge issue that we could possibly see, especially if Russia gets froggy and decides to cut off access.
I need to say one thing here because I'm having a mild stroke. I love Germany, but the biggest goof up that they've done in the last 20 years is that helping out wind absolutely works for them. Their solar program, they've spent somewhere in the order of €1 trillion on it, and it makes 7% of their electricity generation. It's supposed to be enough for 120 of their peak demand. Why is that a problem? Why is there such difference? Two things. One, all of Germany is north of Chicago. Number two, and more importantly, how you hear about England and it's always raining and it's always dreary and whatnot? That rain band, that weather band, goes right over northern Germany. It's the exact same one. It doesn't shine in Germany. And the only place where it does is when you're in the Alps. Oh, wait, you're in mountains. So you're either on one side where it shines or you're in the shadow of it. So that means half of the people can't even get solar power. Yeah, the Germans absolutely goofed up with their solar program. I wish that wasn't the case, but unfortunately it is that they've blown a lot of money and they've gone they haven't gone very far with it. I really hope they start reconsidering nuclear, but everyone's fear-mongering over it. It drives me crazy. I'm going to end that.
No, I think that's a good point.
These solar roadways on the Autobahn anytime soon, are we?
No.
The solar roadways aren't really efficient anyway, so...
They could be. This is completely off topic, but I don't care. They could be maybe in like the southwest of the United States, where there's like weather's the same year round, and there's no like chances of freezing and breaking it at all. But outside of that, it doesn't make any sense. We do have a comment about nuclear energy and what we're talking about here, and this is an opposition to everything that we've said here, is that being pro-nuclear means you don't recognize the full energy cycle of both mining uranium or transporting it for refinement, transporting them for processing, transporting it again for usage, and the level of nuclear waste most often gets put in the backyard of low socially economic communities on this is in the U.S. sense, southern border. And I think those are good. Those are very well laid concerns. I think it misses some of the stuff that we've discovered that we could do in the last 10 years. One of the things is that there's the ability to do a 100-mile burrow hole on site of a nuclear power plant, and basically encasing it with reinforced lead concrete cylinder tubes that you can just dump the barrels into, and there's no chance of leakage pretty much ever, and it can hold up to like 100 years worth of nuclear waste. Just a thing out there. Generation 4 nuclear power plants aren't a thing yet, so I don't think anybody should bring that up, but that's another thing that's possible.
They are
Go ahead,
a thing.
I'll say
are they a thing, or are they still... Hold on.
There's 2 of them out now.
There's two of them out now. Okay,
one of them is Russian.
Okay, well, I stand corrected because I thought they were still in development. But there you go. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll say this. I understand where the anti-nuclear people are coming from, and nuclear energy does have its flaws, especially dealing with nuclear waste. But let's be real. If you want to be able to supply massive amounts of cheap energy to major cities like New York or Dallas or Houston or Los Angeles, wind and solar is great. I'm very pro wind, very pro solar, very pro clean renewable energy, but it's not going to be able to immediately fill in the supply of energy that's needed to power all of these major cities. And especially if we move to an electric vehicle economy, we're going to need even more energy to be generated. And nuclear is the best way to generate lots of cheaper energy that doesn't create fossil fuel emissions, which is causing the greenhouse effect and causing climate change. So I mean, it's not perfect. And yes, nuclear energy has its flaws, but if we want to be able to continue to have the cheap energy, it's something we're going to have to accept those flaws.
And if I could jump off of what Joe said, just for some information for the audience that may not know, what we're talking about here is like dispatchable sources of fuel. Because in the U.S. in the summer, everyone gets home and it's hot. They turn their air conditioning on. If they have an electric vehicle, maybe they plug it in. Everyone doing that all at once puts tremendous strain on the electric grid, and that's what's known as a peak period. So you need another form of energy that you can turn on and off during those peak periods, because otherwise you'll have brownouts, and you don't want that, because brownouts don't discriminate on where they're cutting off power. They will cut off power in the hospital, and that's bad.
I remember losing my electricity in February. It was pretty bad.
The one thing what Tiberius mentioned about the Russian nuclear power, we got to be very careful about Russian nuclear powers. You got to take your time when you make Russian plants. You don't want to be rushing those. Like, I'm sorry, that was there, and I love dad jokes.
Fair enough.
I think some of the other things that is concerning with this, and this is to wrap this all up back into Germany, is that because of what Joe said with how it does provide cheap and at least not global warming causing emissions, is that Germany, and as Tiberius said, Germany shutting down a lot of its plants have actually increased the pressure on energy prices that Germany is experiencing, and giving that in fact does give more leverage to Eastern European countries and Russia in particularly, with their ability to export fossil fuel energy into Germany and the EU at large, because the power demand is still there. As long as we are doing things like streaming, as long as we're doing gaming, streaming, having lights on 24/7, for these like grand cities and stuff like that, we are going to, and population is still growing globally, we're going to need more energy sources, and eliminating energy sources without the ability to store power, which we're not there yet for a lot of green energy. We don't have the battery capacity to store it, to what Norse Countryman was saying. We are going to need to rely on some other sort of energy production, and nuclear energy seems to be the best one. Maybe natural gas is good if there's like tight controls and regulations. That's where I come from on this too. So that's to bring it back to everything that we're talking about. We've been streaming for about an hour and 10 minutes. So what's our analysis here? All right. The Traffic Light Coalition, like Tiberius said, he's pretty confident that it's not going to remain together if it comes together due to overlaps. But do you think that it will come together at all? And if it lasts for, let's say, a year, maybe 2 years or so, what do you think that impact will have on Europe, seeing this kind of left to center left coalition being governing a major European power again, which we haven't seen for since who was before Macron? Not before Macron, but Sarkozy in France.
Oh, I can't remember. I can't rember most of the French.
Well, there's Francois Hollande also.
Yeah, Francois has, but Sarkozy, or I'm butchering his name. But that's who I was talking about.
Sarkozy, Hollande. I think it was it. No, Jean Chrétien is Canadian.
I'm going back to De Gaulle. Let's just go.
You would. No, but we haven't seen this for at least in the last 20, major center left and center left coalition governing a major European power. Sarkozy somewhat is kind of a weird social democrat kind of person in that. So he was, but aside from that, they haven't seen much. So let's talk about that.
Francois Hollande was a socialist. Well, he was part of the Socialist Party. Now, some would argue that he didn't govern like a socialist, but
that was my
party. Yeah. But I think going forward, looking at the issues that caused Merkel and Macron to butt heads was a different idea on what the role of Europe should be and whether Europe should become more of a fiscal union instead of just a monetary union. And I think that was one of the big issues that divided Merkel from Macron. But I don't know if this new governing coalition that's forming in Germany is going to be more open to the idea of the EU becoming more fiscally active, spending more money, being pushing less for austerity, which is what Merkel was known for, especially with how she handled Greece back when Greece was going through its economic crisis. I don't know if this new government is going to take a different approach to those issues and is going to be less inclined to pressure a lot of countries, especially a lot of countries in Southern Europe, to adopt austerity policies and pushing them to cut their budgets in the middle of an economic crisis.
I am so glad that we had this episode today, because yesterday the news dropped that if traffic light forms, the leader of the person who's in charge of their budgets, I can't remember what they call that, forgive me, the person tapped for that is FDP's Christian Lindner. He is a market liberal. He is huge on having zero tolerance spending policy. He's incredibly into austerity. And so, the word going out with him being tapped for that position is already sending panic waves throughout the Eurozone. So, I'm actually a little surprised. I figured that this was the one thing that the Traffic Light Coalition might let go, because, let's just be honest here, left-wing governments tend to spend a little bit more money than their right-wing counterparts. And the fact that they didn't go away with that and they're pushing Christian to be in that position, there's going to be a lot of fallout just going out on that.
No, that is huge. That I completely missed that point when I was doing my research earlier this morning. I didn't see that at all, and that is huge. It makes me think of is this coalition coming together to at least we tried. Now let's go back to the grand coalition or not? Because just that right there, because Schultz was finance minister, and he was very much he kind of butted heads with Merkel a bit about how to properly integrate, what to do with the amount of debt and stuff that Germany had over the rest of the European countries. And so that's surprising. That's very surprising to me.
It did shock me a little bit too. I'm trying to bring up the article on it that I saw drop yesterday. So I'll have that for you here in just a second.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a Guardian article. So I'll post that in your chat right now.
Yeah, I should say he was vice chancellor and minister of finance. I don't know if that's the finance minister of Germany or not, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Oh.
So. But yeah, that's everybody that was curious about that. He dropped it in our chat, so everybody has that link now. So
Yeah, it
But yeah.
actually it booted me for posting links. You've got auto mode
Oh,
on.
man, come on. No, I had this set up to where it wouldn't, but that's fine. So I'll just post it. Let's see. Can I just do this show? We'll just show it on the screen here. There you go. No, I'll get it though. But yeah, so that's very interesting. Wow. Okay. North Countryman, what about you? What do you think this could mean for having a stronger center-left coalition governing a major European nation?
Yeah. So, I'll just offering kind of just a general view, and maybe call me an optimist. But one thing that I took note in looking at this is that Olaf Scholz does seem to be very pro EU. Like he's not a Eurosceptic or anything like that. So I think at least in the short term, there's not any risk of major instability within the European Union as an organization. I think definitely they're going to have a little bit of difficulty getting on their feet, just if the traffic light coalition doesn't pan out as expected and they need to go to a grand coalition. That's obviously a bump in the road, but from what I'm looking at, the pieces here, I don't really see an issue where the European Union destabilizes. I think there's enough here to keep it going for a couple more years and then have to revisit it then.
Okay.
Again, I'm an optimist, and I've also been wrong about every political prediction I've ever made. So,
oh, you're not supposed to admit that on air, man. I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it's good to be an optimist. Go ahead, Joe.
How do you think this new coalition will get along with Boris Johnson and deal with the continued Brexit negotiations or trade negotiations with Britain?
That's an interesting one. I think that because SDP is the primary party head of this coalition, I do think that you may see more time allotted for making certain conditions, make sure that certain conditions are met. So if a condition isn't met, there might be an extension of that condition timeline. But I do think that because they were so involved with negotiating the deal, I don't see the deal being renegotiated, and I don't see any other than, again, maybe some extensions here and there. I don't see anything more than that happening as far as trying to get them back into the fold. What about you, Tiberius, about that?
We're talking about the British trade negotiations right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone's mad at the British.
Yeah, that's
yeah. So the Germans and the EU has largely been, at least since Brexit happened, largely been on the idea of let's punish Britain, and I haven't heard anything of that changing. The other side of that is that when, not to bring this guy up for any particular reason, but during the Trump presidency, is that the United States reworked its entire trade portfolio, and it was on its last negotiation, and that was with Britain. And we haven't finalized that deal because the deal hasn't been made yet. We don't know what that's going to be now under a Biden administration. It could be very similar to what was in line, but it could be completely different. And that completely changes the relationship with the EU, because now the EU and Britain has options. They can pursue something together if the British don't necessarily want to deal with the Americans.
Right. Okay. Tiberius, what about? Oh, no, I'm sorry. North Countryman, what about you? About that?
I think it's great that you had Tiberius on here as the big expert down here, because honestly, we're just kind of the sidekicks to his analysis on this.
We're going to call this Tiberius State today, guys. No, I think Tiberius makes a great point on that. Like I had previously said, I don't see them, doing much with that, but I do think that he brought it home when he said that everybody is pissed off at the UK for doing this, because it was kind of like a giant middle finger to the EU and everything that it stood for. It kind of John Wayne did a little bit with Boris Johnson there. So I do think that that's what we're going to see. But Joe, you brought up the question. What are you going to think? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, like what Tiberius said, I don't think that there will be a big difference in the let's punish Britain approach. I am interested in seeing how the issue with the with the border between North Ireland and the Republic of Ireland gets worked out, because I know that that's created a lot of tension since Brexit, and a lot of issues that should have been solved, that were solved with the Good Friday Agreement, could be there's some contention going on whether there will be a militarized border in Ireland again, but that will have to be worked out, and I think Germany will have to play a role in mediating those negotiations, and also Germany might want to punish Britain, but they also have an interest in continuing with trade with them, and but with Britain leaving, though, that does leave Germany and France as being the two major linchpins of the European Union, because those are the two biggest economies. And
sure.
So really the big thing to watch is what Franco-German relations will look like in the future, because those two countries are kind of the main bedrock of the European Union.
No, 100% with there, and I think we probably should soon-ish do an entire episode talking about the possible reestablishment of a hard border between North Ireland and Ireland, and so that's a great point. I think that we are actually at time now, though. We've streamed for about an hour and 20 minutes, and that's where I like to keep it to. So everybody, thank you so much for coming on. Greatly appreciate it. Tiberius, we'll go with shout outs again, so go ahead and start off with the shout out.
All right, so yeah, if you didn't catch the beginning of this, I am Tiberius D. I study in economics, political science. I'm kind of known as a geopolitical enthusiast, and I largely study and particularly specialize in Western Europe and North America. Doesn't mean I know everything. There's still a lot over there. I can't speak all these languages, but I do like to try to keep tabs where I can, and I hope I've proven that today. So if you're interested in me, I have many, many links. You can check me out on Twitch and YouTube, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Just type in Tiberius D. That's a Y, not with an I. And I'm pretty easy to find, so I'd appreciate you coming around.
All right, thank you, Tiberius. North Countryman, please go ahead and shout yourself out.
I'm North Countryman, and I do know everything. So I mostly do my stuff on Twitch because I kind of like the live aspect of it, and that's something I'm trying to be better at. That is where most of my content is. I am trying to do more and stream more regularly. But if you want to find me, it's twitch.tv/NorthCountryman, North with a 0.
And Joe Chadwick, please go ahead.
Well, I'm not trying to be a public figure, so you won't be able to find me on any sort of website. I kind of do this on the side as just a little hobby, but I am pretty interested in politics, interested in current events, and I do engage in political discussions a lot, mostly in various Facebook groups. But this is not kind of a main gig for me, and I'm not really a public figure, or I don't really have a Twitch channel or do streaming on a professional level. But and I do apologize for all the tech issues. I'm kind of new to this and was having some issues with my phone, but it has been a very enjoyable discussion.
Appreciate it, Joe Chadwick. And again, you're more than welcome to come on this program or the news roundup. So we'll go ahead and call this. So everybody, thank you so much for joining the program today. We appreciate it. If it wasn't for our audience, we would just be a few people shouting into the void that is the internet. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end. So please go ahead and ring that bell, smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. If you like this program, we do other programs as well. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Crowdsourced Politics does the CSP News Roundup, where we cover the weeks of news that was for the past week with a kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. And if you want to get your information on there, go ahead and follow us at Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and join the Discord. That is what you will see me mostly using Discord, and mostly using the Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. So if you want to be on this program or any of our other programs, go ahead and reach out and we will get back to you as soon as we can. And as always, everybody, as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.
All right.
And end.